So today I would like to talk to you about the Performance Continuum, and there's a whole video on this that we've already developed, but I want to explore a little bit more depth about, well, how do you move a low-performing team to a mid-performing team? And then there's going to be a separate video about how to work with mid-performing teams to move them to high-performing teams. So as you recall from the Performance Continuum, in a low-performing team, it's like pulling teeth to get them to talk. They're not making eye contact with each other. They're not engaging. It often feels to be a very unsafe environment, or people have often lost hope about that anything's going to come from meetings. They may not like each other, and that's why they're low-performing. But there's usually a dynamic that occurs in the group that causes them to then function that way being low-performing. And so when you observe a low-performing team, which you can see on the Performance Continuum, tells you what the observational indicators are, which I've just reviewed, then it's your job when we go down to the level of what's the role of the leader or facilitator, what's the style that's used. It's a style in which you need to manage the dynamic that's usually a behavior, and you need to address that dynamic inside the group such that that group then experiences that it's going to be handled and it can actually get results. So you have to manage the behavior, whether that's a dominant personality, whether it's a caustic personality, whether it's somebody that might be called passive-aggressive that's impacting the rest of the group. You see that it's low-performing, the whole team, and then you see what the dynamic is. You have to intervene with that dynamic right in the group. If it's a dominant personality, you have to manage that person. Often it's by holding up your hand, not making eye contact, letting them know that they've had their piece to say, and you have to manage that such that other people can then participate and experience that that one person won't dominate. If it's a caustic personality, the same thing holds. You have to put the brakes on and make sure that that person, that the team sees that that's unacceptable behavior. Now, sometimes just doing some subtle things, using a hand without eye contact, will manage the behavior. Other times you have to get much more direct with that person who's a caustic person. You need to use an approachable voice pattern. You need to tell them to stop what they're doing, make sure that they're understood, and allow them to know that that particular way of being in the group is unacceptable. So you have to be willing to take that person head on. That's an intervention. And you're doing it not to hurt the person, but to allow then the group to experience that they have a space, they can talk, and it won't be stopped by this particular dynamic. There have been some times when I've worked with low-performing teams that there's a dynamic that's so difficult that you actually have to remove them from the group. There's ways of removing people from the group while they're still sitting there, which is you basically just holding them, you're not making any eye contact, you ignore them, you just don't give them any face time or talk time. But there are rare times when you actually need to give them a choice about leaving the group, that you've given them ample opportunity to speak their mind. You've often charted what they have to say and what their concern is. They can see that it's been charted, they can hear and see that it's been heard by the group, and they still persist in a behavior. At that time, you need to give them a choice and then literally actually remove the choice and ask them to leave the meeting. You can have the same dynamics, a dynamic of a dominant personality, a caustic personality, a passive-aggressive person, and this team is still high-functioning. And what's the difference, you may ask? Well, in that case, the group manages that dynamic, that particular behavior in the group. So it's not shutting the group down, and the group just manages itself. They either make light of it, or they acknowledge it and say it's unacceptable. So it's a particular dynamic when the whole group is low-functioning. But I just wanted to make the point. The same dynamic can exist even in a high-functioning team.